Okay, so hi everyone. So today we're going to be looking into information that helps us answer the question, how does genocide even happen in the first place? And this is particularly exciting because we're going to be thinking about human psychology. In other words, how do we as individuals think, and does the way that we think impact the way that we behave? So that's going to help us to answer that question. And then we're also going to be looking at how groups behave. So thinking about psychology, how we behave as individuals, how we think and behave as individuals, and how we think and behave as groups. So this will be, we're going to start off by looking at a specific study by Stanley Milgram. And basically, he is a psychologist and a researcher who wanted to find out, and this is post World War II. So this is like in the 1960s. And of course, there's a lot of focus on the fact that there are individuals from World War II who are being searched for and prosecuted for what they did during the Holocaust in Germany and in Europe. So because of that, because they were finding people and convicting them with these crimes against humanity and really uncovering a lot of the ugliness of what happened during the Holocaust, there were a lot of people, especially psychologists, thinking about the question, okay, well, how is it that someone who appears to be a normal kind of law abiding citizen, someone who's just kind of like, a regular dad, mom, employee, student, how is it that they would agree to participate in this horrific genocide? And these are some questions that came up when you guys were watching The Ghosts of Rwanda and learning about the Rwandan genocide too. And I think it's a really good, important philosophical question. Are people just evil? Or is there something about us that causes us to commit these actions, even though, like, inherently, maybe we're normal and good people? So this is why he conducted this research, because that was the question that he was asking. So in 1962, these were the specific questions that Stanley Milgram asked. One, why is it that people obey authority even when they know that what they're being asked to do is inherently wrong? So that question stems from the idea that during these genocides, there are people who said, well, I was just following orders. Okay, maybe I am an SS soldier during the Holocaust, or maybe I am just a regular citizen, but my government and my leaders are telling me that I have to do this thing, and so I have to do it. Even if there's something in me that says, oh, that doesn't sound right. Like that sounds, my moral compass is telling me that that might be the wrong thing to do. Second question, why is it that individuals obey the authority, but they refuse to confront that leader and say, I have a problem with what you're asking me to do. It seems like it's wrong. Okay, so why does this happen? And so, what we're going to do is take a look at what he conducted as a research methodology. Okay, so first, he recruited subjects for his experiment from various walks of life. So, it was basically an advertisement, which you can see an image of right here. It was a public announcement. The idea is that the respondents were told that this is an experiment that's going to study the effects of punishment on learning ability. Now that is not what it was doing. So that was the cover. Okay, it was essentially lying to people by saying, okay, we're gonna do an experiment. We need volunteers. You will be paid for your time, and this is what it's meant to study. Now, in 1962, $4 an hour was a decent amount of money. So they were all offered this token cash award for participating in the study. Now, everyone believed, upon volunteering for the study, that they had an equal chance of either playing a role as a student in the study or a teacher in the study. But the process was all rigged, so everyone who was recruited for the study was playing the teacher. The the role of the learner was actually an actor that was working in conjunction with the experiment. Okay, so you're recruited as a volunteer for this study, and basically what happens is it's explained to you that you are going to be, sorry, that you're going to administer electric shocks to a learner when questions are asked incorrectly. So you're going to be asking them questions from behind a wall, and you can see the diagram here is how the setup was. So the teacher is the volunteer who has no idea what's going on. The student is actually an actor, and the experimenter is also an actor and part of the experiment. Now, the reality is that even though the teacher is asking questions, they're not actually administering shocks, but they think they are. Okay, and they start with 45-volt shock samples that are given to the teacher so the teacher can kind of see what it might feel like, and it hurts. So they believe they're actually hurting this volunteer student, who's not really a volunteer, who's really an actor, every time they get a question wrong. Notice, according to this diagram, that the teacher and the experimenter are sitting in the same room, and the teacher, who is actually an unknowing volunteer, believes that the experimenter is sitting there watching. Okay, that's a very important component. All right, so you go into your experiment and you see the shock levels are labeled from 15 volts to 450 volts, okay? And you just experienced what it feels like to have 45. Okay, and then also labeled on these scales are verbal anchors that start with slight shock and end up with extreme intensity shock. So you believe that you are administering shocks progressively. So every time the student gets a question wrong, you have to move up a level and give a harder, more painful shock. Okay, so in response to the jolts, the learner, who is an actor, would begin to make noises at about 75 volts or complain at 120 volts, ask to be released at 150 volts, and plead with increasing vigor to, like, let me go, I'm done, okay, at 285. So that was consistent for every single individual that they had playing the role of the teacher, so that it would be an actual controlled study. Okay, eventually the learner, who is an actor, would scream and yell of heart pain towards the end. Okay, so frequently with these individuals who were recruited for the study, the actor who was playing the role of the student would refuse to answer any more questions and go silent. And then at 330 volts, the actor would be completely silent. So imagine being a volunteer recruited for this study and just hearing nothing. And every time you ask a question, the experimenter who's sitting right behind you says, you have to keep going, ask another question, administer the shock, okay? So basically what you're doing is you're being told by the researcher or the experimenter that silence is a wrong answer and go ahead and shock them, okay? If at any point you refuse or hesitated, the experimenter would say things such as, the experiment requires that you continue. So essentially pressuring that teacher, I'm sorry, but that's what we're doing here and you have to continue. So go ahead and ask the next question, go ahead and give them the shock, even if you think they're dead, because they're not responding at all. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys a few minutes to take a look at what this study actually was. So go ahead and click on the link and take a look at this quick video. All right, so here's the result. 65% of the teachers were willing to go all the way through to the maximum voltage level. So the 65% did not quit, did not say, I'm so sorry, but this is wrong. This guy is dying. This guy's in pain. I shouldn't keep doing this. They actually continued to do what the experimenter said, went all the way to the end. So here's some information that was described about these participants. Some of them pleaded with the learner, asking them, come on, think carefully. I don't want to have to shock you. Just please get it right. Some of them started to laugh. Some of them just started to shut down emotionally and appear completely cold or hopeless or even arrogant. And some of them actually articulated that they thought that he was dead, that the learner was actually killed by this. But yet they continued to obey the experimenter. Remember, they all got paid regardless. So it wasn't like, oh, I have to continue or I'm not going to get my $4. It was just, this person is telling me I need to do it, and I just need to do it. Okay. Curiously, this experiment was repeated recently. And when I say recently, it was over the last 10 years. But still, it's interesting to think about whether or not that was just the way people were in the 1960s, or that was just the way people were during the Holocaust. But now it would never happen. Well, let's take a look and see. So go ahead and click on the link. Okay, it's your turn to start to think about what conclusions you can draw. How does this psychological study help us to understand human nature and why people participate in genocide? Okay, so this is the next research that we're going to look into. Now, Solomon Asch was also a psychological researcher. His question was, why are people more likely to go along with what they know to be wrong if other people are doing it? So this is one of those questions that often comes up when you're in middle school and your teachers and your parents and youth group leaders and adults in your life really want you to start thinking about peer pressure and why sometimes we conform and we go along with what everybody else is doing, even if there's something inside of us that tells us that this is wrong. So when you think about the Rwandan genocide and you think about all the people that just jumped on board to join the people in their community and attack others that were like their neighbors and friends, why would they do that if there was a part of them that thought that it was wrong? Okay, so here's Asch's experiment. So what he did was it's a line judgment task, and I'm going to show that to you in a few minutes so you can kind of get an understanding about it. But basically, in the picture, you can kind of see an image of how it worked. But you have a whole bunch of individuals sitting around a table. All of them are in on the experiment. So there's really only one person in there that's the actual subject, that's the actual volunteer who has no idea what's happening. Everybody else knows what's happening. You have one person conducting the experiment, and then what they do is they show on the screen, they show one image of a line at a specific length, and then they show another image of 3 lines at various lengths. The question is, which line in the second box matches best the line in the first box? Okay, so the participant is sitting at the very end and is the last person to give their answer. All right, so the question is, are they going to give the answer that they know to be true? Because obviously, like for example, in this image that you see on the screen, the correct answer is C. What if everybody else says a wrong answer? Will the participants stick to their beliefs about truth and say, no, you guys are crazy, it's C? Or will they just go along with the group so they don't stand out and look like the oddball? All right, let's take a look at what actually happened. So go ahead and click on the link. So here's what happened. On the average, 1/3 of the participants went along with the group, even though it was the wrong answer. Okay, 75% of the participants conformed to the group and chose the wrong answer at least one time. Okay, so maybe they stuck to their guns and they were like, no, y'all are crazy. That's not correct. But at least once they went along with the group, even though it was the wrong answer. And 25%, so 1/4 of the participants, never conformed at all. So that 25% of the people are those that actually stuck to their truth and went with what they knew to be correct and true. Think about how that compares with the Milgram experiment, where we saw that about 2/3 of the humans that were tested obeyed authority, even though they knew that what they were being asked to do was wrong. Okay. And a similar percentage of those tested in this trial conformed, even though they knew that what the others were saying is wrong. So, what does that say about who we are and why genocide continues to happen? Well, when they were interviewed after the experiment, many of them just said, I knew that those people were crazy and they were saying something that isn't true, but I didn't want to be like the oddball. I didn't want to like be made fun of, and it made me question my thinking. So I want you guys to take a minute just to think about the Asch experiment and the Milgram experiment. I want you to think about what that says about humans and maybe connecting it to even just the Rwandan genocide. Why is it that people obeyed authority? And why is it that people conformed to the group, even if they believed that what was happening is wrong? Now, that assumes that all of those people knew that it was wrong. We could argue that some of them maybe were actually evil and didn't have an understanding that what they were doing is wrong. But this tells you something, that maybe even when we know that what we're doing is wrong, we don't question it and we go along with the group.